Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Levin, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify. I'm Tarren Bragdon, the founder and CEO of the Foundation for Government Accountability, a nonpartisan multi-state policy organization that works with state leaders across America to free individuals from poverty through proven welfare reforms. All of us are here because we want the same thing: to help as many families as possible escape poverty as quickly as possible. The best way to do this and to solve many of the other challenges welfare programs currently face is through a simple but powerful tool that must be core to any welfare reform conversation: work. But here's the fundamental problem with the welfare reform conversation. It's a debate dominated by rhetoric and anecdote. 50 years ago, Congress and President Johnson tried to answer the question of how do you end poverty? But the sad truth is that strategy has failed. But the tragedy of the failed welfare state is not how much money is being spent. The real tragedy is how many families are being trapped in poverty for far too long, sometimes generations. So how do you get somebody out of poverty as quickly as possible? In 1996, Congress and the President, in a bipartisan way, took this problem head on, requiring able-bodied, childless adults to work in order to receive food stamps, working 20 hours a week or volunteering. And if they refused, they would have to cycle off the program after 3 months. But Republican and Democrat administrations allowed states to waive these requirements, but thankfully, several governors are restoring them. And I'll focus my comments on 2 states: Kansas, which restored them in 2013, and Maine, which followed in 2014. We launched an effort in Kansas to track the 41,000 people impacted by this policy change with the largest study of its kind, matching those who were on welfare with the state's Department of Labor hiring and earnings database to see what happened after the policy change. Maine replicated this methodology for 10,000. The results are inspiring, and we no longer have to rely on speculation or anecdotes, but we can see how common sense work requirements worked, and the results prove that the bipartisan effort of Congress 20 years ago was on the right track. Before Kansas restored work requirements, recipients on average received about $200 a month in food stamps, whether they worked or not, and most did not. But for those who refused to meet the work requirement and were transitioned off welfare, guess what happened next? They went to work in record numbers, half right away and 60% within a year. And not only did they go to work, but average income of workers doubled, and the average income is now above the poverty line. Maine saw similar success, all this within 12 months of the work requirement being reinstated. And even those who stayed on welfare were better off. Enrollees were more likely to be working more hours, incomes increased, and the average time that somebody spent on welfare was cut in half. Simply by following the work requirement you established 20 years ago caused enrollment for these adults to drop by up to 90%. Because people literally transform themselves through work, earning hope, higher income, and a brighter future. This paints a clear, inspiring, and simple roadmap to federal welfare reform. And it's a road that Congress has already traveled. If Congress could do just one thing, it should be to add these common sense work requirements and time limits to most of the 80+ means-tested welfare programs for all non-disabled working-age adults. And here's another important thing to consider. This reform frees up limited resources to help the truly needy, including the more than 600,000 Americans who have intellectual disabilities or are in frail health waiting for Medicaid waiver services. And fortunately, these are also incredibly popular bipartisan reforms, with 82% of Americans supporting work requirements. This is an American thing. It turns out that work works. You set the standard 20 years ago, and I'm here today to ask you to finish what you started. Thank you. My written testimony highlights in much more detail, as well as I attach the reports and some of the key takeaways, and I'd be pleased to answer any questions that you have.
Great.